Hi, my name is Kristy Robinett, and I am a professional psychic medium. I am a paranormal investigator, and I am a psychic profiler. My story is a little bit more complex than what you might have heard of others. I didn't have a near life death experience. I didn't have a accident which caused me to hit my head and all of a sudden become psychic. I grew up. I was born this way. And this way, to me, instead of being normal, was actually considered very, very abnormal and thought it as being a curse. When I was all of about 3 years old, I had my great grandmother that came to me in spirit and who told me that my grandmother, my mom's mom, was going to pass away. And I needed to let my mom know, I needed to prepare her. And so I did. And my mom actually gave me a spanking. It was very, very destructive for me because I attributed being able to see the spirits to being something evil and being something bad and something that was going to equate to me getting into trouble. So the more and more that I saw the spirits, the more angry that I got. And I actually went in the closet, figuratively and literally. They never went away. The spirits, the ghosts, they never went away. So I would actually go into the closet and I would talk to them because that way I didn't think that my mom and dad would know what I was doing. Well, they still knew that I was a little bit odd, just a little bit. And I wanted to be normal. I so wanted to be normal. When my grandmother passed away soon after I predicted it, I was looked at very, very different. And so they thought that I was just bored. I was just an overly creative child. And so they took me and had me tested at the local Lutheran school to see if maybe I could project this creativity in that way. And the spirits and the ghosts, or my imaginary friends, is what they were called, that they would sort of disappear. So I was tested and I began school when I was 4 years old, and it did not go away. In fact, it made it worse because my kindergarten teacher had her father who was in spirit and who continued to drive me crazy with messages, so much that I couldn't pay attention to the schoolwork and I often ended up in the corner or getting into trouble. And I was a really shy, quiet girl who I always only wanted to please everybody. And for me to be in trouble, it was heartbreaking for me. I was also a little bit sassy, so I would, tell my mom if I didn't know the answer the first time and they put me in the corner until I'd know the answer, how was I going to ever know the answer? So, it a little bit of sarcastic wit at the age of 4 or 5 years old. I the longer that I grew up, the more the experiences became even more prevalent. I actually physically see spirits. They appear to me as in flesh and blood most of the time. And I see those that have crossed over, and I see those that have not crossed over, and what we refer to as ghosts. Those that have crossed over are spirits. And typically, they just have a message that they want to share, their loved ones, their family members. It's not so ghost whisperer, but it can be. I was about 8 years old when my grandfather ended up having an accident, and whether he had a stroke or whether he was beaten up, he was put in intensive care and he was pretty much going to die, and he kept asking for me. And at that time, nobody under the age of 16 was allowed in intensive care. I begged my mom, please let me go see grandpa. And she goes, "You must just be crazy. You just must not know what he's saying. I don't know why he's asking for you. You don't want to see him like that." And I begged and I begged, and I thought I had finally convinced her. And then he passed away. And at his funeral, when the casket was being lowered into the ground, I saw him in spirit. And I saw him not too far, a few yards away from where his body was. But he was standing there in flesh and blood, and he was smoking a cigarette, which was so grandpa. And I walked over there, and yeah, I went to hug him and he said, "No, honey, you can't." He goes, "But I have to tell you that I know what you are and it's not evil. And you have to know that I'm your guardian, and you have to know that this is something that's good, and it will be good, and I will always be there for you." And then he walked away and dissipated. He still is my guardian today, and he didn't let me down. A couple of years later, I ended up being, there was an attempted kidnapping, and at that time, the Oakland County killer here in the Michigan area was going on, and it was pretty scary. And while this man was asking to take my picture, I stood up to let him, and he grabbed my arm. And as he walked me a couple steps, I heard my grandpa say, "You have to turn around and you have to run, Kristy." And I could smell that cigarette smell in my around my body. I knew that it was grandpa, and I turned around and I ran for my life. And to this day, I firmly believe he saved my life. I didn't really continue to believe that it was something good that I could do, that I could see. Even after that, I thought that it was still something that was evil. So, with my parochial upbringing, and it wasn't until I was in my 30s that I decided that this was something that I needed to do. I started to work on police cases, and I started to do some self exploration, and I found my identity, and this is my identity, and I love it. And about 3 years ago, I ended up quitting my real job, and I opened an office, and I do this full time. I do mediumship readings, I do psychic readings, I do crystal readings, which is crystals have different vibrations. And what I do is I choose crystals according to what the angels and the guides want. And I've done gallery readings, audience readings, personal one-on-one readings. I read for celebs, I read for professional athletes, everyday people. It runs the gambit. I like to not really be considered a psychic, but more of an intuitive friend. And that's sort of how my sessions run. They're a little bit different than what I would say a typical psychic or medium is. I don't like the whole stereotype of what the psychics and mediums have been portrayed on television, because I think that it's more foofy. This is work. It's not easy. It's not easy being me, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. A long time ago, I would have said it was a curse, and there is no way on earth that I would do this, but I love it. So this is part one. Part two is coming.